asked a lot of different questions. We're going to talk about a little bit about soil today, talk a little bit about food, talk about vortexes, talks about the pineal gland, third eye, seedless fruits, and pretty much everything that's kind of going on, right? So first and foremost, I posted up that lawsuit that's happening with the titanium dioxide, and I believe that will turn into a class action lawsuit, which will be huge. Because the fact of it's going to get larger, and that the video has been shared and a bunch of people have been sharing everything. So I feel like that's going to bring a lot of publicity to that, with just everybody else sharing it and bringing knowledge about titanium dioxide so that people know how toxic that stuff is. And there's so many other toxic ingredients that are put into foods, which I have talked about as well too, such as maltodextrin, citric acid, and all these other basically derivatives of chemicals that they try to use. I think TSP, which is trisodium phosphate, that's another one. You know, they put all these things in the foods, and then we're consuming them, and then we develop an illness, and then usually after we start to develop some sort of illness, then they try to sell us the solution, right? So for example, if titanium dioxide leads to inflammation, bloating, and all types of stomach issues, then most likely the pharmaceutical companies or medical companies will begin to pump out a anti-inflammatory pill or some sort of something like for the gut, so that you can balance out the gut. So they put these things in the food, and then basically, you know, they cause all these reactions, and then they sell it to us so that it's a constant revolving market. I mean, even if you look at even stuff like appliances, and how appliances, they'll make something and it'll last 1 year, and then you'll have to replace it. You know, back in the day, they'd make something and it would last 50 years. So it's the exact same type of thing. It's this revolving market of getting you to constantly purchase, and then also having you constantly sick, right? That's the other thing too as well. Since people are constantly sick, these chemicals keep coming in, then they just have to keep going and getting the solution, which the solution usually has the same chemicals that were originally in the food they were buying in the first place. And I did this whole post on Telegram and I'm going to put it into a video, but of all the ingredients in medical pills. And it's pretty crazy because the 7 ingredients in medical pills are all of the toxins that are also in the food supply as well. So not only do they sell you it in the food supply, then they try to give you a pill which has the exact same ingredients in there, which poisons the body. Citric acid is in everything. It's so hard. I think there's a better form, but most companies use the mold form. Yeah, and that's the thing with citric acid. They used to use lemons and limes for preserving something, right? They used to use lemons and limes derived from citrus. And they also used to use boric acid. If you want to look into borax, you can. It's a great salt that's great for the body. But they used to use boric acid at the time, and then they switched to citric acid, where they actually used from citrus, and now they use citric acid from a GMO mold derived from GMO corn. And it's a mold that leads to allergies and swollen tonsils and sinus infections and bloating and brain fog and all of these things. So if you ever see the word citric acid in your food or even in some of your products that you're purchasing, you should avoid it. Reason being is because the hazmat safety data on citric acid said it will burn your skin. So it's crazy because if it can burn your skin and you put it into your body, it's also going to destroy your insides as well too. So they're just using a lot of different preservatives to extend the shelf life, right? So like if you take a tomato off of a tomato plant, you know, it will last about anywhere from 3 to 6 days, right? If at most, basically. But, you know, because of using all these preservatives and putting them in a jar and putting it in a box and putting chemicals in it and everything else, they can extend those shelf lives from anywhere from, instead of 3 to 6 days, they extend the shelf life to 3 to 6 months. You know, and that's why a lot of the stuff that's sitting on the shelves is usually toxic. You know, and that's why it's so important to turn around and read the ingredients. You know, when you go into a store and you ever look at anything, it's important to look at the ingredients so you know what you're touching or what you're using. If it's shampoo, if it's food, if it's cleaning products, if it's laundry detergent. You know, look up all the ingredients. Just take the ingredient, type it into Google, and go to maybe EWG or another thing, and just look it up and see what data comes up. Because as soon as you look up, for example, titanium dioxide, you'll see that it's banned in Europe. You know, so that's a big one. If it's banned in Europe, there's a reason for it, because the fact that it's probably been very toxic, but it's not banned in America because it's still being sold in America. And that's the problem, is You have give and take everywhere, right? There's certain things in Europe that are great, and there's certain things that are in America that are great, but it's all a give and take. But it's the awareness that's needed so that you know what you're consuming. Lactic acid. With lactic acid, that's another one, that usually comes from, they can use it. It's a form of lactose that can be from a cow that's fed poisons and chemicals and things like that. So lactic acid is another one you want to steer clear of, especially if you are lactose intolerant, which most people are lactose intolerant if they are consuming pasteurized products. So lactic acid can actually cause the same issues. Look into cell salts. Cell salts are the ability to heal using different forms of salt. A lot of those cell salts will use lactic acid or lactose as a preservative to extend the shelf life for those salts so that they don't evaporate. So, when you really look at a lot of these ingredients, these titanium dioxide, citric acid, maltodextrin, all these different, things that are derived from chemicals, when you really look at all of these things, they're just using these things to extend the shelf life as long as possible so they can make the most profit, right? Because if their products last on the market for anywhere from 3 to 6 months to 12 months, and it's like food, like for example Skittles, I think it can last probably indefinitely. So if that can happen, they can still turn a profit a year later. Versus, for example, if I was selling lettuce, I would have to sell my lettuce within about 7 days in order to even make any money. So, all these corporations, and especially when we take it into the candy section, they're all owned by a larger company called Mars, which owns all the candy. So if you actually did buy candy, you're actually buying from just one company who owns every single brand of candy. And this goes to just like certain other things when you're going to buy them. For example, if you go into the grocery store, a lot of the things in the boxes at the store are also owned by one company. So it's important to be aware of who owns the company, who's producing these things, the background on these things, and yes, they are fake foods, and yes, I grew up eating them too as well, not knowing, and I was a kid eating candy, for Halloween, eating candy and all these different things. But the problem is, we just didn't know because there wasn't the internet, right? Like you didn't have the ability to look any of this stuff up. There was no research on any of this stuff. You had to go through books and all these different things, and the books were usually paid by the companies who are making these products, like CRISPR, right? CRISPR, this new technology that they're talking about that's so revolutionary for the world. All of the funding for CRISPR is funded by the people who are creating it. So if there's no funding going against it, or I'm sorry, there's no studies going against it because they're actually creating the funding and funding the studies. Just like cell phones and radiation and Wi-Fi, a lot of people, I don't see any Wi-Fi studies because they're not funded. They stopped funding technology, for example, technology studies back in the 1990s after Nokia had to start hiding all of their data and all of their studies because they basically found out that these things were going to be very dangerous in the future, and that was only on 2G and 3G. So now we have 4G, 5G, and then they were talking about 6G and all this other stuff. So, and same thing, yes, classic romance with the shots as well too. A lot of this stuff, it's all funded by the people who are trying to push it onto us. So somebody was asking also about ascorbic acid, and ascorbic acid is from GMO corn as well too. So that's another one. Anything ascorbic, citric, maltodextrin, soy lecithin, sucralose, aspartame, those are the majority of them, but all of those I would stay clear of. And if you do need a vitamin C, all you can do is, I'll just show you, I just brew up my little tea, but you can take some lemons or limes and you can cut them, make sure they're organic so they don't have pesticides on them as well. And you can cut them up and you can boil them down and make it into a tea, and that will give you all of your vitamin C that you need. The lemon peel and the lime peel have the highest source of vitamin C that we can possibly consume. And that's the thing, they don't tell us to eat the skin, they tell us to eat the inside of it. And we're supposed to be eating the skin because you eat the whole fruit, and the peel has all the nutrients. So that's a lot of times why they try to put stuff up in the air, because it's also affecting the skin as well too. It's all from GMO sources, even the product is. So even though the product can be labeled organic, yes, citric acid is usually, or 99% is GMO, ascorbic acid, GMO. The thing is, there's fine lines, right? Like, it's the main ingredient that maybe is organic, right? Like let's say you pick up like one of those bars, like a protein bar. it'll say USDA organic, but maybe only 1 or 2 ingredients are USDA organic, and then the other 2, 3, or 4 ingredients are not organic. So then that's the deceiving part that can be